Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Shonda Brinson, and I am a licensed social worker and family support services counselor at the Gift of Life Donor Program. On behalf of Gift of Life, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, Fighting Compassion Fatigue Together. Before we begin, I wanted to review some housekeeping items with you. We ask that you keep yourself on mute to limit background noise. We've already noticed that at the start of today's presentation. We also recommend that this also occur for speakers unless you're speaking. For optimal viewing, we do recommend that you view today's webinar with the gallery view. So definitely be sure to select that if you haven't done so. If you have any questions, please enter them in the chat. We will reserve time later for questions and answers. We also want you to be aware that this webinar will be recorded for future viewing purposes. Next slide. Today's webinar is hosted by the Gift of Life Donor Program. Gift of Life serves as the organ procurement organization for Southeastern Pennsylvania, Southern New Jersey, and Delaware. We work directly with families at the time of their loved one's death to coordinate organ, tissue, and cornea donations. You'll find some highlights about our impact in our region on this slide. Our Family Support Services Department provides bereavement support to families after donation has taken place. Some of these services include individual and family counseling, support groups, and coordinating communications between donor families and transplant recipients. Next slide, please. The agenda for today's webinar is on the screen. Over the past 2 years, we have experienced significant stress as we have met increased demands for services. Conditions brought on by the pandemic and increased incidents of violence have not only complicated the lives of the clients we serve, but have also presented unique challenges for us as service providers. We wanted to create a space to discuss these unique challenges in the ways that we as professionals could navigate them in order to take care of ourselves and provide the very best services for our clients. We have an excellent program in store for you. We are joined today by an esteemed group of panelists who have graciously offered to share their personal and professional experiences on this topic. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce Raquel Williams, who will be moderating today's panel. Raquel Williams is KYW's News Radio Community Impact Reporter and an award-winning broadcaster. She came to KYW from Beasley Media, where she served as news director and morning news anchor for their New Jersey cluster, as well as brand manager and assistant digital program director for WCTC, where she hosted the community affairs program, Community Outreach. Raquel began her radio career at her college station at Fairleigh Dickinson University and went on to several New Jersey stations, including New Jersey's 101.5, where she served as afternoon anchor for a decade. Other positions included those at New York's FM News 101.9 and iHeartMedia's 710 WOR and the national 24/7 news source. Raquel has won several awards from organizations such as the Associated Press, New Jersey Broadcasters Association, and the Garden State Association of Black Journalists. She is currently a member of the New Jersey Society of Professional Journalists and Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Without further ado, please welcome Raquel Williams.
Thank you, Shonda. Hello, and thank you for joining us for what we hope will be an inspiring and engaging conversation about a subject that doesn't really get the attention that it truly deserves, compassion fatigue. I'd like to thank the Gift of Life Donor Program for inviting me to moderate today's discussion. Compassion fatigue is defined as follows: a condition characterized by emotional and physical exhaustion leading to a diminished ability to empathize or feel compassion for others, often described as a negative cost of caring. It is sometimes referred to as a secondary traumatic stress. Now, our panelists will be able to expound upon that definition, and I'm sure that there are plenty of variations of it, but you get the idea. I brought that up because, as you know, I am a reporter here in Philadelphia, and I've been a journalist for almost 30 years. Although I have not really experienced to date a diminished ability to empathize or feel compassion for others, the fear I do have personally, though, is that our audience and the general public at large as a whole will experience a diminished ability to feel compassion. I certainly am not in the trenches directly supporting people who face trauma, but I do report on it, and the effects can be exhausting. I try not to take it home, but that's difficult. The constant barrage of stories of gun violence, very draining. As community impact reporter, I often get reaction from the community and civic organizations as to how they are feeling and what can be done to stop the violence. The look in the eyes of family members and neighbors and communities impacted by senseless violence is almost one of hopelessness. Again, I feel the pain. I internalize it, and sometimes it can be draining. Spend some time in K&A. I have, whether it's to discuss the opioid epidemic and its impact on Kensington and surrounding communities, or the homelessness that plagues the area. It is sad and, again, emotionally draining. The racial injustices in this country and our area reached a fever pitch just a few years ago and intersected with an emotionally draining pandemic. We watched as countless people lost their lives to something we've never heard of before. And we watched and learned alongside the experts who are still actually learning about this virus today. The fact that certainty disappeared left us uncertain about what could possibly happen next. Experiencing it, living through it while reporting on it can be draining. Now, on the part of caregivers and our panelists who live this every single day, they have to give more to support not only their families, but their clients who are also dealing with the stressors of COVID. Now, we seem to be heading toward an endemic, and that's good news, but staff at various centers of care are still very overworked, and they're tired, and they're strained. It's a lot. And it is okay to not be okay, but we all need support to lift each other up. Today, our panelists will candidly discuss their experiences, share how they cope, and discuss ways they can support one another in order to continue to provide high quality care to their clients. Let us now meet our panelists. As I introduce them one by one, I will pause so that each of them can give a brief synopsis about their experience and specific aspects to this discussion. We will begin with Lara Moretti. Lara Moretti has worked at Gift of Life Donor Program since 2003 and is currently the Director of Family Support Services. She and her team provide grief and bereavement support for families of organ and tissue donors, act as a liaison between these families and the recipients of their loved ones' gifts, and they organize events to honor and remember the legacies of organ and tissue donors. Lara provides training to all new staff at Gift of Life about compassion fatigue and the importance of self care. We'll be talking about that too. She obtained her BS in Education and Social Policy from Northwestern University and her MS in Social Work from Columbia University. Lara is a licensed social worker in Pennsylvania, and she received her certificate in thanatology, which is the study of death, dying, and bereavement. This is through the Association of Death Education and Counseling. Lara will now discuss compassion fatigue in detail and how it's not as easy as ABC. Welcome, Lara.
Thank you, Raquel. And even though we've been doing Zoom for 2 years, we're still learning things. I think to optimize everyone's viewing experience, it's better to put yourself in speaker view than gallery view. I was just figuring that out as I was listening to Raquel, so I recommend people try that. Okay, so I'm going to talk about what compassion fatigue is, how it is different than burnout, and how we can learn to recognize it and prevent it. The unique work of supporting individuals, patients, families, and communities is accompanied by many positive feelings and experiences. However, this challenging work and the intense emotions we may experience have the potential to create negative consequences as well. As Raquel said, here at Gift of Life, we do train all of our new staff, those who will be working with families in crisis, newly bereaved families, who talk to them about the opportunity for donation. we talk about compassion fatigue. We want our staff to be equipped with the knowledge about it so that they can prevent it and have long, fulfilling careers. Compassion fatigue differs from burnout, which generally occurs over time and can often be relieved by making a change, such as taking time off or changing jobs. Burnout can occur even when there is no exposure to trauma. Any professional can experience burnout. Probably around April 15th, there's a whole bunch of tax accountants who are experiencing burnout. I don't think they're experiencing compassion fatigue. What they're experiencing is burnout. Professionals who experience an emotional burden as a result of their exposure to the traumatic events of their clients and community, these are the folks who are at risk of vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue. So what does compassion fatigue look like? It can, of course, look different in different people, but there are some ways that it may present itself. Cognitive symptoms include things such as lowered concentration, apathy, rigidity of thought, and disorientation. Emotional symptoms can include powerlessness, anxiety, fear, anger, feeling depleted, changes in affect. Behavioral symptoms might look like irritability or moodiness. There might be some hypervigilance, experiencing nightmares, and isolating oneself. There can be spiritual symptoms as well. This can include questioning life's meaning, feeling of pervasive hopelessness or skepticism, and questioning one's religious beliefs. And then there are physical symptoms as well: sweating, rapid heart rate, problems sleeping, changes in appetite, aches and pains, getting sick more often because our immune system has been impaired. Ultimately, compassion fatigue may impact a professional's ability to effectively care for the next family on their caseload. A key thing to remember is that if we do experience compassion fatigue, it doesn't mean that we are bad at our jobs. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't do the work, but that can be really hard to separate sometimes. So the key to preventing compassion fatigue can be thought about in terms of the ABCs: awareness, balance, and connection. Awareness requires having meaningful information about compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma. It also means that we possess the insight to recognize these symptoms within ourselves. I'll share a personal experience with you. My first job out of social work school, I landed my dream job. I was working in a hospital in a medical unit. I was living in New York City, and it was great. It was all I would hope for probably about the first 9 months or so. And then I started experiencing something sometimes people call the Sunday scaries, right? I was dreading going to work on Mondays. I had stomach aches and headaches. And then when I was at work, I was pretty miserable. I distinctly remember having these internal conversations, this pep talk, if you will, where I had to psych myself up, put on the right face before I would walk into the room of my next patient, the next family. It wasn't happening automatically because I didn't have it in me anymore. And I really felt like I just didn't care, which was a horrible way to feel. It was frustrating. It was scary. I knew this was not the kind of social worker I wanted to be. I thought this meant that I chose the wrong career. And so the solution that I found was to leave. I left the field. I worked in a totally separate industry unrelated to social work, and I did that for a few years. I eventually found my way back to social work, worked in a job for a few years before coming to Gift of Life. And what I realized in retrospect, what I experienced back then, long time ago, was that I was experiencing compassion fatigue. It wasn't that I wasn't meant to be a social worker. It wasn't meant that I didn't have the skills to do my job. I didn't have the skills to recognize what I was experiencing. I didn't have the knowledge or the support around me to help prevent it or to help me deal with it once it occurred. So with this webinar today, we are starting with awareness. And my fellow panelists will dive more into the concepts of balance and connection as ways to further prevent compassion fatigue. Thanks.
Thank you, Lara. Our next panelist, Scott Charles, is the Trauma Outreach Manager for Temple University Hospital, and he's also director of Temple University Hospital's Cradle to Grave program. That's an award-winning hospital-based violence prevention initiative that educates public school students and youth about the medical realities of firearm injury. He also coordinates the hospital's Trauma Victim Support Advocates program, which connects violently injured patients to crime victim services throughout Philadelphia. Scott also directs the hospital's Fighting Chance program, which teaches community members to provide first aid to victims of gunshot injury. He also directs the Safe Bet program, which has distributed more than 8,000 free gun locks to city residents. Scott's work with trauma surgeon Dr. Amy Goldberg has been showcased on CNN, CBS News, ABC World News, MSNBC, Huffington Post, and NPR's Fresh Air with Terry Gross. Their work has also been featured in the New York Times and in the HBO documentary Gunfight. Scott holds degrees in psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. Is going to be talking today. He was scheduled to talk today about that work-life balance issue and how we try all not to take it home. However, Scott, being what he does, there was an emergency and he had to step away. If he can, he is going to join us mid-discussion, but we still wanted to acknowledge and tell you about our panelist, if he can join us, Scott Charles. Our next panelist, who will be talking with us now, is a spiritual life coach, Reiki master and teacher, motivational speaker, and massage technician who supports people in creating lifelong habits that cultivate emotionally, physically, and spiritually strong choices. Yolanda Toole facilitates change by aiding people evolving into their true human potential as the owner and sole practitioner of Evolving Spirit Wellness, that's located in Newark, Delaware. Yolanda's lifelong engagements include advocating for families of children with developmental disabilities, supporting educators and administrators within educational institutions at the primary and secondary levels, implementing diversity and inclusion curriculum for healthcare professionals, and mentoring juveniles exposed to the criminal justice system. Yolanda's proudest accomplishments are her 3 daughters, son, and granddaughter. Her only son, Isaiah, has become her guiding light. As a tissue exclusive donor after his sudden death in 2013, Isaiah has provided a new purpose for Yolanda as a donation advocate. Yolanda serves as a volunteer ambassador with the Gift of Life Donor Program and as a member of the MTF Biologics Donor Family Council. Yolanda will now talk briefly about how to maintain strength through truth and faith. Welcome, Yolanda.
Thank you so much, Raquel, and thank you, Lara, for giving us examples between burnout and compassion fatigue. And when I think about strength, I think about capacity. Lara, you spoke eloquently about our capacity mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. All things have capacity, including us as humans. I know professionally and personally, I deal with people's capacity. People don't come to see me, whether it's as a life coach or a massage therapist, if they have not gotten to or are about to exceed their compassion mentally, emotionally, physically, and also spiritually. And so what I know now that I didn't know then when I went through my own tragedy is that when we are at that capacity, we have to tell the truth. I think we are hardwired to make sure that everyone else is okay, even when we are not. And certainly those of us in service industries, we think that is my purpose, to make everyone feel better. But what I know now that I didn't know then is when you are not at your best, you cannot give your best. And so it's very easy to slip into compassion fatigue and you not even recognize the signs, as Lara said. And so we have to start telling the truth. And for me, strength is truth. It is the search for truth. And it's the search for saying, I am not well, or I am exceeding my capacity to care. When we exceed our capacity mentally, confusion, emotionally, numbness, physically, we're ill or exhausted, and spiritually, we feel separate from that essence that is within each and every single one of us. And when I think about my own spirituality, it is the only reason why I'm here. I think that spirituality for me exceeds gravity in keeping me grounded and keeping me centered. Certainly after experiencing several tragedies in a short period, a divorce, both of my parents passing, and as Raquel said, the death of my only son, Isaiah, when he was 16 years old. If it were not for my spirituality, my own capacity mentally, emotionally, physically would have ended. And spirituality, includes compassion. The compassion that we have for ourselves and others is our spirituality. It's our spiritual essence. Compassion is mercy. Compassion says, I can meet you where you are, and I'm not coming with criticism and judgment. I'm here to support you. And we can support each other. And that also does not come without telling the truth. And so when my child passed away, my greatest concern was my other children, and also everyone else. Pretending that I was okay, pretending that mentally, emotionally, and physically I was doing well, but not really telling the truth until the truth revealed itself. And oftentimes, many of us, how many of us are pulling up at the house at the end of the day and we sit in our car because we know we have exceeded our capacity and we don't want to take it into the home where we find our sanctuary and our loved ones. And so we all have indicators when we are reaching our fatigue when it comes to compassion. And spirituality may be the avenue where you find your strength to tell the truth and say, I'm not doing well. And I know that there's something or some place that I can go. And so I have to tell the truth. That is the strongest awareness that we as humans can have, is telling the truth, that I've either met my limit or I'm almost there. And so when we are taking on more than we can handle, when we are exceeding our capacity, that's not really where the strength is. The strength is in telling the truth and saying, I need something else to support me. I need my spirituality. And for many people, it is found in religion and religious beliefs. But spirituality is within each and every single one of us. It is, for me, that essence that keeps me grounded. As I say, I might bend, but I'm not going to break, because something is keeping me centered. Something is keeping me grounded. And so for me, creating a safe space is how I express my spirituality. Creating a safe space within my prayer life, my meditation life, knowing where I can go. I have a prayer partner. I thank God for her, because I know that's a space I can go where there is no judgment, there is no criticism. I can say, I am tired mentally. I can say, I don't have it emotionally. I can say, I don't feel so well. And it's not a disruption of my experience. It's an allowance. It's a mercy. It's saying, okay, how can I support you? Not that she needs to fix it, but she's creating the space where I can see the truth of what's going on, so that I can increase my capacity to heal myself, to refill myself up. And so anywhere there is no judgment and criticism, to me, where I am honored, is a safe space. I value those places. And I know that as colleagues, oftentimes we are a sounding board for one another. I would ask that as we are supporting one another and strengthening one another, that we allow people to have their human experience and not diminish what they're saying. If someone comes to you and says, I've been in front of the classroom all day and I've just had it with kids. And here someone may come and say, oh, you shouldn't feel that way. Let us create those spaces where people can feel exactly how they feel and not feel bad about it. We're already criticizing ourselves. And so for me, telling the truth and knowing that your truth will be heard and will be seen and will be met with compassion and mercy first starts within our own selves, where we have to say, I'm not feeling well. Doesn't make me a bad person, doesn't make me horrible at my job. As Lara said, she thought she was horrible at her job and I'm just out of here. But telling the truth and creating the safe space that says, I'm human and I have exceeded my capacity. And now I'm going to go to places where I know I can be supported. I'm going to support myself by seeking these safe spaces, and also having the faith that taking a break is what all of us need to do. Honoring ourselves with rest, honoring ourselves with the permission to have a breakdown sometimes. When I'm working with people professionally and they say, well, I had to shut down emotionally or I would just break down. And I said, let me tell you something. If you're going to have an emotional breakdown, there's nothing you can do about it. You won't be able to stop it or control it. And so allow yourself to feel everything. That's strength. That's faith saying, I'm going to have this moment and it's going to be a moment. I don't know how long this moment is going to last, but I know on the other side of that moment, I'll be able to see things differently. That is you having compassion for you. That is you having compassion for others and saying, when you see someone, you don't know what their capacity is. And so you may be seeing all of the things that Lara has talked about. It could be compassion fatigue that you meet out on the street that looks like road rage. It could be compassion fatigue that you meet at the airport that sounds like a tantrum. It could be compassion fatigue that we see in society where people have exceeded their capacity, but they don't know how to tell the truth about it. And there's not a safe space for them to do that without criticism or judgment. And so for me, strength through truth and faith means I have the faith that I can tell the truth. People will accept it because I've created a safe space within me and I've connected to other safe spaces. We have to be that for ourselves. Let us continue to be that for one another. I would not be where I am if there weren't individuals who allowed me to break down as much as I needed to break down, but also poured into me when I was ready to get back to the level of mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual capacity that we all have. And so I'm grateful to be here today so that each and every single one of us starts telling the truth about where we are. And even saying, thank you for the introduction. For many of us, compassion fatigue is a new world, and I hope we put it in our toolbox so that we start to recognize when we're getting to that point of capacity exceeded. Thank you.
Thank you, Yolanda. Brought up some great points, and I've been known to tell people, "Don't tell me how to feel." I say that all the time. So, and that support is so important. Thank you again, Yolanda. Our next panelist is a 35-year-old loving mother of an 11-year-old boy and an EMT lieutenant in South Jersey. As a first responder, Stacy Rodanas has lived a life in service to others as an EMT for 17 years and as a CPR trainer. When Stacy was just 11, she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and she suffered with the progressively debilitating disease for about 20 years. In 2017, Stacy received a life-saving kidney pancreas transplant. Grateful for her gift of life, Stacy helps others through her work and honors the legacy of her kidney and pancreas donor by sharing her story as a volunteer ambassador with the Gift of Life Donor Program. Her transplant allows her to live her life to the fullest and enjoy the things she loves most, like spending time with family and friends, creating craft projects, and restoring her 1965 Ford Mustang. Stacy will now briefly discuss how she found her gift. Welcome, Stacy.
Hi, thank you so much. Yeah, so I would say that probably when I became an EMT when I was about 16 years old, compassion fatigue wasn't something I really thought about. It really wasn't even something I thought about later on in life until I had my transplant. Um, it's funny because as we go through this career in pre-emergency medicine, we kind of learn to avoid our feelings, and it's not a healthy culture. We learn to just kind of shove it down because in the moment you have to make really tough decisions and don't have the time to really have an emotional decision about it. There's no judgments that are made. You have to have a really very open mind because you never know what kind of patient you may or may not have. Um, Once later on, I had my transplant. My number one goal really, and what got me through that was having the ability to come back to work and know that I was helping people. I've always had this compelling need to feel like I was helping someone when I got into the career. It wasn't even because it was a typical, I wanted to help people. I was actually just this nosy 16-year-old and wanted to know what emergency medicine was like. I wanted to know why they were cutting open cars and what that meant. I was really curious. And then once I got into it, I realized it was something I was made for. It was something that I really was good at. I was very compassionate with my patients. I really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed that I got to talk to different people and learn a lot of really new things on an everyday basis. Once the pandemic hit is when it started to probably become its toughest. I was out for 3 months for the pandemic because I'm a transplant patient. We didn't know what was happening. And once I came back, it was a completely different world that I was walking into. I think everybody had a little bit of compassion fatigue, and we just really didn't even know it. I honestly, when I was given this opportunity, didn't even really have an idea what compassion fatigue was. It's not something we talk about. We're not really such verbal individuals in this field. We don't talk about our feelings. We don't, we'll sit around and talk shop, but we don't talk about our feelings as much. So it's kind of like a taboo topic. So once I started really learning what it was and actually sat down and we had one of our first meetings about it, I sat and thought to myself, I wonder if that's something we all probably have and don't even realize it, because you're giving so much of yourself on a daily basis. The hours are long, the shifts are long, the weeks are long, and it's, a lot of unknown situations that you're walking into. So it's not, you're constantly giving something of yourself all the time. And you're not really giving anything to yourself or taking that minute to think to yourself, hey, I need to do something for myself, whether it's taking a break, taking a minute, just something. So it's something that's really been brought to my attention, even with myself, talking about this, just realizing that, yeah, we contribute a lot to other people, but not really so much to ourselves as much. And so you have to learn to separate that. So I started to give myself a little break here and there, whether it's, watching some of my favorite shows or just, as much as it sounds like retreating, sometimes I need that. Sometimes I need people to not need me all the time, because that's what you have. You have people needing you or wanting something from you all the time, where you have to take the step back and say, you know what, I have to give something to myself, even if it's for 5 minutes a day, even if it's for 10 minutes, taking a walk outside, something, just giving yourself that little bit of break to understand it. So volunteering has been my thing, making my crafts has been my thing, talking to others about my transplant story and bringing awareness so that people can help others. I mean, all those things have really helped me get through all of that. And it's even helped me kind of get through my transplant process 5 years later, because I think that's something that I had probably a little compassion fatigue then when I wasn't working. And, I was feeling really terrible about myself. I was not in a great place. And, people would kind of tell me what their, issues were. And I'm like, well, I can't even walk. So, you kind of just lost a little bit of empathy. So I sulked a lot, and it helped kind of pull me out of it, that I got to do stuff and then finally come back to work. So it became a really good thing to, talk to my coworkers when we have bad calls, and, just kind of get through it with each other and take those minutes to just come to your own and get back in your own head.
All right, Stacey, thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. You all made some really great points, and we'll start and continue our discussion now, with some of those points. One being, of course, self care. Now, all of you are compassionate givers, 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 and your cup is always emptying, but you need to refill that cup back up somehow. So we want to talk about self care, and as women, especially, I know Scott's not here with us right now, but as women, especially, we're always taught to push through. No matter what, we just push through. We take care of everyone else, and we are last on the list. And we feel guilty about self-indulgence. We feel guilty about doing things for ourselves. Tell me what everyone does for self-care, and, what do you do about that guilt, as far as, I'm going to get that pedicure, it's okay. You don't have to feel guilty, or whatever it is that you need to do, take a walk in the park or what have you. How do you take care of yourself, and how do you ignore that little guilty voice in the back of your heads? We'll start with Lara.
Well, I ignore the voice. It's still there. I'm not going to say that I don't feel guilty. I guess I just try to do it. For me, it starts with just also having boundaries. And, I have a routine when I leave the office. We normally wear badges. I took it off for this talk because I didn't want to be having it. And when I get in my car at the end of the day, one of the first things I do is take the badge off. And my commute's not terrible, but I use that time in the car to decompress, listen to music, or I'll talk to my mom. I'll do something that is really not about work to give myself that time to decompress. Sometimes I'm more successful at it than others. It certainly was a challenge when we were working from home during the pandemic, because I didn't have that 30-minute block of time where there was that transition. So that was harder. But for me, it's like Stacey, sometimes it's just retreating. So, watching some silly show on Netflix and just escaping is is that being active. I've never been someone who loves working out, but I have a dog now. I got a dog during the pandemic, like millions of other Americans. And so walking my dog and being outside with my dog is a good way for me also to just decompress and take care. And occasionally I'll schedule that manicure, pedicure, but not as often as I should.
All right. What about you, Yolanda?
Self-care, what is that? So I have to be honest. For me, it's a matter of personal integrity. If I'm telling people to take care of themselves and I'm literally working with people in increasing their capacity to care for themselves and care for others, I can't be hypocritical and not do that for myself. And so because I know how I am, for me, I always make sure it comes back to personal integrity. And just as I need to eat to live, I need to breathe to live, there are things that I need to do so that I maintain balance and order in my life. And so I'm lucky that I live in a house with big windows so I can see nature. So even if I can't get out there, I will look to the left. I'll look in front of me so that I can connect to something very quickly. As someone that works with the human energy system, I know having natural things that you see, my plant babies, like many of people during the pandemic, I got a lot of plants, something else to take care of. So it's worked into the fabric of my day. It's not just a nice thing to do on the weekends. Every single day has to have some self-care routine in it, or I know I will feel it the next day. And it's also telling myself no. Those things that I say, oh, I could just do some more work. I could work some more. No, you cannot do it. That's telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could fill up a whole lot of time with a whole lot of other things. Say no and feel good about saying no. And so I have a new relationship with the word no, particularly when it comes to my children, my granddaughter. I can say no without feeling guilty because I know I'm winding up giving the best of who I am when I say no, when I don't exceed my capacity.
Yeah, there's a lot of power in the word no, and I'm starting to embrace that now myself. I know it's difficult, but there's a lot of power in it. And I know, Stacy, you find time to, work on your car and do things for yourself, go for walks. Do you ever feel guilty about doing things for yourself?
Oh, every day. So I'm attached to my phone pretty much 24/7 because work follows me home. So I'm never not at work really. There's always something happening. But so I haven't worked on my car as much, but the weather and a couple other things, I haven't worked on it as much, but I've been driving it at least. The guilt never goes away because my son's father passed away waiting for an organ. So I'm pretty much full-time mom. Oh, hold on, sorry.
That's okay, Stacy. I know Stacy, where she is, she's an EMT. So when those alarms and sounders go off, they're very, very loud. But they need to be alerted as to emergencies and things that are going on. You can continue,
Yeah.
Stacy.
So, I don't always have the opportunity. I have to be full-time mom. I have to be, sending cupcakes to school projects, teaching when I'm here at work or dealing with some sort of issue or, so there's always something going on, a house project. So I try to find some sort of enjoyment of whatever I'm doing at home. And just let my mind kind of wander is what I end up doing most of the time and just letting it kind of just break free of the everyday routine of work and the same stuff that I'm doing all the time. So I try. I'm still learning, Yolanda. I'm learning how to say the word no as well. It's not successful whatsoever. And I appreciate all of you that are able to keep plants alive. I tried it. I killed a cactus. It's not working for me.
That's okay. Plants tend to come to my house to die too. But we'll learn. We'll learn. We'll definitely learn. Um, Larry, you mentioned, that at your first job, I think one of your jobs that you became so overwhelmed, you didn't realize that you had compassion fatigue and you just left. What do you all fear the most with regards to compassion fatigue and the work that you do? Is there a fear of feeling so overwhelmed that you might have to leave? What are the fears there?
Hmm. Um, I think the fear, and I think it goes back to, what makes us really successful in our jobs are the same things that put us at risk, right? So we're good at our jobs because we're compassionate and we're empathetic and we are active listeners and we kind of take on the burdens of our clients, and we're, you know, we're perfectionists and all of that. And so how do you don't want to stop being your best self, well, in order to protect yourself. And, if I don't want to ever feel like I can't listen to someone else's story. Part of my gift of being here is that I can be really present to these families when they talk about their loved one. When someone dies, often people are afraid to say the person's name or talk about them. And giving the families that we serve space to talk about their loved ones is, I know, can be really powerful. And I never want to lose that capacity to hear one more story. So I guess that's my fear, is that I will, not feel able to really listen to the families.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Yolanda?
I have to say, I'm honest. Every single day I have that conversation. You don't want to do this anymore. You find something every single day. But I found that when I allow myself to have that conversation, I learn what's really going on. And for me, it's never really, I want to leave. Sometimes it's, that was a really challenging client. And then I can start to deconstruct, okay, what was difficult about it? What did you learn? I think if I avoided that thought of, I might want to leave, then I might get to the point where I don't recognize when it's time to leave. As they say, you should always know when to leave the party early. You don't want to be the last one there. And so every day I have that conversation. Is this what you want to do? And if it is, then we keep going, because I know me, if I ever ask myself that question and I have a definitive no, then it would be the time for me to do something else. And so being honest with myself, and knowing that in my honesty, I'm really going to find the truth of what's really going on. And most of the time it's a conversation about money, or it's a conversation about time, and there are instances where I have cried for people that I don't even know based upon stories that I hear. I'm angry at people and I want to find them and, give them a piece of my mind. I let myself feel whatever is coming up. And that goes back to trusting yourself and telling the truth, trusting yourself that you're not going to run out the door, even though every single day I'm like, that's it, I can't do this anymore. But it's also trusting yourself enough to know, what else are you going to do? You love this. You love, and you've been called to do this. So what else? And I've tried, like Lara, I've tried to do other things. They have not worked out well at all, because this is what I love to do. And so for me, it's honesty and allowing that fear to be present. Okay, something's coming up, so we need to talk about it. We need to figure out what's really what's really going on. What's the root of that? It's really not that you want to leave. There's something else going on, and you need to figure out what it is, because it may be what makes you a better spiritual life coach. It may be what makes you a better listener. It may be what makes you better at this thing that you love to do. And so for me, it's, okay, we want to leave today. What is it today, Yolanda? What is it today? Tell yourself the truth.
Right. Gotcha. Stacey, any fears with regards to compassion fatigue and your work that you do as an EMT?
Yeah, so I gotta say that, I walk into every call with a very open mind and a lot of empathy for people, because I've been there where they're at. I've had my worst days. I've had to take my own ambulance. My own ambulance had to take me to the hospital a couple times. So I've been in that position, and I never want a patient to feel like they are a burden to us, because that's not what the case is. Even our people that are regulars that don't need to go to the hospital necessarily, I don't want them to feel that way, because we're there for a reason. You know what I mean? We're doing this for a reason. But there's some days where we're absolutely so busy, or someone has said something that has been not so favorable to us, that you kind of like get to the point where you're just like, I can't, I have to walk away for a second, because you get it's emotionally taxing. And I'm one that I don't necessarily feel everything that I should feel after a hard call, or, after having a really sick kid, or, having to do CPR on someone and tell a family that, yeah, we're not going to continue. There's not always days where I'm emotionally ready to handle that, but have to. And then by the end of the day, you're just like, I'm emotionally taxed out. I have to do something. And there's most of the time, there's really nothing for us to do. We talk about it a little bit, and I go home and I try to separate it because my family's not used to that life. My family has regular jobs. I have a very taxing, emotionally taxing, very busy job that is not everybody's made for, and it's really difficult. And there's some days that I'm like, do I want to walk away from this life? Because it's a life. It's not just a job, it's a life. And there's days where I wonder, but then I realized that I also worked in a clothing store, and that didn't also go that well either. I was bored out of my mind. So yeah, I mean, I wonder, but I don't know that. I mean, I love this job.
Thanks, Stacy. Lara, I was wondering, did your views on death and dying change after you studied phenology? And did it help you with how you deal with family and how you cope with stresses?
Yeah, I think the program that led me to have that certificate, I think really in some ways validated kind of the work that I was doing and kind of did instinctually. It grounded it in theory and different perspectives. Certainly, I really feel as though, I may have studied, different grief theories and different approaches, but the families that I work with, our clients are the experts in their experience. And I can't tell them how they're supposed to feel, just like you said to someone, don't tell me how to feel. Their truth is their truth. And, my job is to kind of companion them on that journey, maybe offer them some resources, offer them some support, offer them the perspectives, things that I've learned from other families, and provide them with an array of options that might work for them, because everyone's experience is different. So I think that's the approach I take to working with families who are grieving. I mean, it certainly has impacted my own perspective. We are working with families in horrible situations, worst case scenarios, and that can skew your perspective on like the world, because this is all that I'm seeing. So I also, on the flip side, I do also get the opportunity to work with recipients like Stacy. So I do get to see the other side of it. So that is nice. And that kind of helps to balance some of the emotional burdens that we take on when we're working with grieving families. That helps me balance it.
Yolanda, you were talking about always speaking the truth and even doing so when you feel overwhelmed. How important is it to have a safe space to do that?
It is life-sustaining. Even as a spiritual life coach, there are days when I just don't have it. I had one on Monday. I lead a group every single morning. It's literally a spiritual awareness call. And I say, hey, I don't have it. I don't have it today. I have something personal going on in my family. I don't have it. I didn't even have to tell them what it was, but every single person rallied around and said, don't worry about it. We got it. We'll carry the call through. I listened to it later, and it could not have been any more affirming that is a safe space for me. As I'm going through stuff, I can send a text to my prayer partner. I'm holding space for you. I got it. And safe space doesn't just allow me to do whatever and run amok. Safe space also keeps me accountable. So if I am my own unsafe space, if I'm, criticizing myself, if I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that, my prayer partner is like, I'm going to challenge you on that. I'm not going to let you talk about yourself in that way. And so it is essential that each of us find a safe space, create a safe space, and acknowledge the safe spaces. Sometimes a safe space is 5 seconds with a stranger in the supermarket where they say something that takes you off guard and you're like, that's exactly what I needed to hear today. And so the more that we acknowledge that there are safe spaces around us, we'll see them more. And you get to determine what your safe space looks like. No one can tell you, oh, you shouldn't be friends with that person. Well, you don't know. We may not agree eye to eye. We may not see eye to eye, but they let me be who I am. They don't judge me for it. They don't criticize me for it. They don't make me feel less than. So yeah, we may not be compatible in other ways, but when it comes to speaking within our heart, I know I can do that. So for me, safe spaces are life affirming, because every single one of us who is human are having incidents and experiences in our life where we don't feel safe, where we don't feel seen, we don't feel heard, we feel like we just cannot manage or make it through the next moment. And so, for me to have several lifelines in my life, certainly when Isaiah passed away, Gift of Life was a lifeline that I didn't know. I didn't know, because there's no manual, there's no grief book that says, okay, this is the way you're supposed to feel when your dog dies. This is the way you're supposed to feel when your cat dies. This is the way you're supposed to feel when your child dies. There is no manual. There is no right or wrong way. You just go through it. And thank God for the people who can see you in your humanness and pick you up and say, listen, you don't have to be anything other than who you are in this moment. And I'm going to stick with you and stay with you. So for me, it's as essential as air to have safe spaces.
As I look at the time, we want to make sure we open things up for questions from participants. If there are any, I'm going to ask Shonda if you've seen any questions in the chat that we should relay to our panelists as we continue with our discussion. Is there anything?
So there's no questions, but there are a couple of comments. So Talia wrote, always wanting to do more to help more people. And Robin Ellington wrote, when you love it, we can see it more as a calling than the job.
Yeah. Always wanting to do more to help other people, which is fine. But yeah, we do need to definitely find time for ourselves. I wanted to ask a question to Stacy. You received a transplant, and most of us won't receive a literal gift to keep us motivated. What are the gifts that you recognize that keeps you connected to your job, Stacy?
So something that really connected the most with me is my experience at the hospital, my experience with my nurses, my doctors, my surgeons. The whole experience in the total was really life-changing, because it puts you in a place where you have to be very vulnerable. And the people that I deal with are in a very vulnerable situation. So it makes you realize how people treat you, how they speak to you, how they empathize with you. Just the little things that they do for you really makes a difference on how you heal, how you react to things, how you feel about it, how you recover from it. And I think that a lot of people don't necessarily realize that. Like when I would discuss something with my doctor, he knew that when I said something, he would listen to it and genuinely listen to it. And so that's what I do with my patients. I genuinely listen to them, because they know their bodies better than anybody else. They know how they feel. So I got a lot of really good insight when I had my transplant, that, I was in a place where things didn't appear to be wrong with me, but I felt that they were wrong with me. And then they found it just by listening to me. And that's how I find a lot of things with my patients now. I listen to what they're saying, and we go with it, and most of the time they're right. They know what's wrong with them.
Yeah. I recently spoke to a gentleman whose family is from Russia, and we were talking about self-care. And he told me, self-care and mental health is just not something that they speak of. It's not something, especially for the men, to talk about. They just do what they have to do, and they don't talk about mental health or self-care. So there's still a bit of a stigma out there when it comes to self-care and mental health. Lara, where are we as far as, overcoming that and breaking past all of that and getting people to, you know, get the help that they need if they need it, and that it's okay to say you need help?
Yeah. I think one, silver lining of this pandemic has been that there has been a lot more discussion about the mental health needs of everybody. And so that's been good. I think people are talking about it, normalizing it more. Certainly access is still not there, right? There are waiting lists to see doctors and therapists, and people maybe don't know how to access it. There's still absolutely a stigma related to mental health. But I think the more we talk about it, the more we are going to challenge that. And I think to Yolanda's point, right? It's if we're telling our clients, I think that's great, right? If we're telling our clients that they need to take care of themselves, we need to walk that walk too. We can't just, talk it and not actually live it, which is hard to do. It can be a challenge every day to put yourself ahead. It's a little bit like what they say when we're on an airplane. If you're traveling and the oxygen mask comes down, and if you're traveling with somebody, you need to put the mask on yourself before you help the person next to you. Such a simple thing, but it really, I think, applies very much. So just talking about it more, and having more access to the support, mental health supports, and I think making self-care not something that has to be a huge thing. It can feel overwhelming if we feel like self-care means I have to commit to going to the gym 5 days a week. Like that may feel unmanageable, but I really liked what Yolanda said. Like, even if it's just taking 5 minutes one day to walk around outside or to look outside, you can get self-care in small doses and really have it be part of your everyday being. It's easier to add things in incrementally in 5-minute slots than something huge.
Absolutely. Well, that does conclude our panel discussion. It's been very lively, candid, and I do appreciate everyone's time. I'll now turn things over to Shonda Brinson.
Thank you. So Raquel, there actually was another question. I think Lara probably answered it, but it's from Saskia. She wanted to know, how can staff members be encouraged to really be intentional about self-care? And she also just commented that Lara did, so wonderful.
Yeah, if anyone else has any other thoughts on being intentional about self-care, feel free to chime in.
I do. For those of us who are givers and in service industries, and one thing that I had to learn is to let people love you. We can be so focused on giving that sometimes we miss the opportunities of other people wanting to do things for us. We have to be the first one to do everything. And when people say to us, oh, I'll do that. Oh, no, that's okay, I got it. Let people love you. That is also a form of self-care. When people like to do things for you, when people even give you a compliment, don't diminish their compliment with, oh, this old thing, I bought this years ago. Let people love you. Let people shower attention and affection on you. It supports them in their self-care as well. If we're the only ones that are running around and doing everything for everyone else, we don't leave room for other people to shine and to find how to find the caregiver in themselves. And so self-care is not just the things we do for ourselves, it's also the things that we allow people to do for ourselves. I just wanted to make that point.
So I have to say that's a hot topic of discussion in my relationship, because I am like the aggressor. I'm like I got this, I'm good. Like yard work is the biggest thing that I'm like, I'm cutting the grass. And he's like, no, I'll cut the grass. I'm like, no, I like my lines. He's like, no. It's like, that's the argument. It's like, who's cutting the grass? We argue over that because he's like, can I do something nice for you? I'm like, no, I got this. He's like, no, seriously, sit down. Like there's days he's like, you just gotta sit. Just sit. And I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing. But it's something you have to allow someone to do for you, just to show that you have. It's very tough for me. I have a very difficult time with this.
Yeah, we all do. And someone actually mentioned that they go to their therapist. Their therapist is always available to them if they need to talk with someone. And it's that could be, that person's safe space is going to therapy. As long as you have somebody to talk to and a safe space within to do it with, I think that's pretty important.
Another place for safe space is to really find your support within your work world as well. Kind of to Stacy's point, our jobs, as much as our families love us, they may not really understand what we do. And we also want to protect them a little bit from some of the trauma that we see every day. And so, I certainly, I've been doing this job for a long time, and I think my husband could probably tell everyone what I do, but I don't know if he really gets what I do. I mean, he's in finance. There's like to me, there's like no comparison to like what we do as far as who's having a more stressful day, but you know, we could get into our own arguments over that about whose day is more stressful. So making sure that you have people who really understand what you do and use them as sounding boards, having you know, to Yolanda's point, a safe space to say to a coworker, that was a really hard phone call I just had, or that was a really sad, you know, situation, and acknowledging the feelings that have come up, you know, with that conversation, or when you're reviewing the record and reading the notes and what that brings up for you, and having your peers to be able to bounce ideas off of, or just say that. And I think having that kind of support in your work is really important to allow you to continue to do that work. You need to find someone who really understands what you do.
I noticed that I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I'm always a fixer. So like someone will start telling me their problems and I'm like, well, how can I help you? Like, how can I do something for you? So something I really learned to do, and it's really important for everybody to realize, is sometimes we just have to listen, and that's kind of therapeutic as well. Just listening and feeling, you know, sometimes people just need to be heard. I mean, myself included. Sometimes I feel like I just need to be heard. I don't need a fix for it. I don't need a solution. I just need to be heard.
And wonderful. So thank you all for just, you know, expanding on that with some additional advice. I do see that we have a hand raised by Broderick. Do you want to take yourself off mute? I'm sorry, we actually can't hear you.
Nope, still not hearing. Perhaps it's better to just go ahead and put all the questions in the chat so that we can just read that.
Oh,
Oh, there you are. We can hear
you
better
can hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry. Go ahead.
You're good. Go right ahead.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I really
Oh, you muted yourself one more time.
I think if you keep your headset on, we'll hear you.
That probably was part of that. Yeah. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. So I'm glad I had the chance to make this webinar today, because I have experienced you know, fatigue, compassion, and when Laura was talking about, it's good to have somebody there on who works with you to assist you, just to throw some stuff. I didn't have that in my last position, and I experienced fatigue, compassion, to the point where I burned out. Like I literally had to leave my job. And it just bothered me because there was no one there to help me when that was the deal. You know, I'm gonna give all myself in this position, but you have to, if I come to you and say I need help, you know, help me. And I didn't have it. And I literally spiraled down. But today I got the help. And that was me I go to therapy, because that's what I need. If it's not therapy, it's church, you know, something to keep me grounded, to keep me able to do what I love to do. Right. Sorry, I'm a little caught up right now, but
okay.
Yeah, but it gives me the strength to continue to do what I want to do. And in my new position, I have a great team. You know, I have somebody I can bounce things off of. I have somebody who will give me support. I have somebody who can look at me and say, okay, you need to get out the building right now. You know, so I just wish there was something else that I could do to help others who are, as I think Yolanda put it, afraid to tell their truth. You know, because sometimes in this position, if you tell your truth, you can't do your job. And that's simply not true. It's just that I need help doing my job right now. So I really think I'm really glad I was able to attend this panel. This webinar really helped me out a lot. So thank you, ladies.
Absolutely. And, I know someone brought up the whole no judgment zone and having, the safe space. That is exactly what we have right here.
Hmm.
And it's important to be able to, again, speak your truth and be truthful about it. And, because hiding behind things doesn't really help. And what I
Hmm.
notice is that the more we talk, the more we share with each other, the more we find out that we're all pretty much going through the same things.
Hmm.
And, if we can find that commonality between all of us, we can support each other, which I think is
Exactly.
really important to have a support structure.
Especially in this field.
Absolutely.
Great. So it does not appear that there are any additional questions in the chat at this time. Without further ado, I do want to just, conclude the webinar. I hope you found the discussion enlightening and helpful for your practice. I would like to thank our panelists for their participation and Raquel Williams for moderating a very lively and engaging discussion. As mentioned earlier, this webinar was recorded. This recording will be sent out to everyone who registered. In addition to that, we will also be sending out a link to complete a survey. We ask that you take time out to complete the survey and provide us with feedback on other topics that we could prepare in the future. The first 25 people to complete the survey will receive a small thank you gift to help with your self-care. As always, we are a resource for you. If you have any additional questions, please do not hesitate to contact us directly. Thank you once again for joining us today, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.